Good evening, Beer Geeks, and welcome to the 29th Craft Beer Channel live show. We've got an absolute cracker for you this evening. We've got two of our favourite breweries, two breweries where we've made really exciting content with before. Two of, I think, some of my favourite Craft Beer Channel videos, maybe. With Yonder and Little Earth. I hope you've got your Rennies ready.
Oh.
Have you got yours out, Brad?
You know what? I just had a horrible flash then. We've got to get a train at 6:30 in the morning tomorrow to Bristol. And I haven't got any Rennies in the house, so...
I'll bring some tomorrow to try and rescue you, I guess.
Yeah, please do.
You'll have to wait until then. So we're off to Lost and Grounded tomorrow. So we've actually already recorded our Friday 5 p.m. and you'll see how much that screws with our heads trying to talk about something that hasn't happened yet tomorrow at 5 p.m. But yes, back to tonight. So I really hope there's some new faces out there that have never done our live shows before. This is the first, I think it's the first mixed firm focused one we've done.
Yeah, I think it is, right? We did Wild Beer Co. ages ago, but that was more straight
We did, but I think there was some clean beer.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
I think there was some clean beer in there. I can't quite remember. I really hope this really works. Apologies for it being a Thursday. Both these breweries are really small and both have their own tap rooms and pubs, which is obviously incredibly vital to their business. So we're doing it on a Thursday when that's either not busy or not open. But I hope that you guys really enjoy it. We're going to do all 6 beers, but you shouldn't feel like you have to. These live shows go live again after the fact, and you can rewatch them if you want to taste along with us again, just not quite so live. So let's get into some quick bits of admin. This is the drinking order for tonight. So we're alternating the breweries. We go Yonder, Little Earth, Yonder, Little Earth, Yonder, Little Earth, and building to a blackcurrant and rye sour, and starting with the only non-sour of the night. It's a all Brett and hoppiness. We're going to crack ours now, but we won't talk about it until we welcome the breweries on, just because I'm a little bit thirsty. What else we need to talk about? So throughout the show, sometimes the comments get a little bit crazy and it's hard to keep up. So we sometimes miss questions. If you really want to get your question answered, you can use the super chat, which you can just donate a little bit of money to the channel, pays for us doing nights like this. And then we'll answer your question at the next socially acceptable opportunity. So we won't interrupt anybody, but we will get to it as soon as we next can. And if you love what we do and aren't already a member, you can join our Patreon. From $1 a month, you get access to the amazing Discord forum. Tell them about the Discord forum, Brad.
It's a hub of knowledge, a hub of kindness, coming together of minds, great minds, I would say, Johnny. I feel like we've learned a lot from everyone who's a Patreon member thus far, and we built this little community that directly feeds back into the content we make. So. A lot of the stuff we're making now is as a direct result of Patreon, first off, because that's how we kind of fund the channel. We're also getting lots of ideas now submitted, and it's just great. We were filming the other day with our Porter Brew thing, and one of our Patreons, Josh, came down. We had some beers together in the real world. It's a cool thing, right?
Yeah, it is amazing, and we hope that once the world opens up a little bit more, we'll be able to hang out with all of you guys in real life. And we are planning, once things are really open and people can travel, to do a meetup of Patreons, probably with some great beer, some great cheese, some great meats, some great breads, probably some great crisps, knowing us, and have a little feast together, I guess, would be the best way of looking at it. So in the comments, we'd love to hear your views. Ask any questions to the breweries when they come on. Please let us know what you're drinking, whether you're drinking from the box or not, and let us know your thoughts on the beers. And, of course, where you're from as well, because we love to hear it when people come from all over the place. Hopefully it's not just going to be people from the UK. We've got somebody in. It's their first live event. Welcome, Chris. Thanks for joining us. Lone Wolf, I also thought that when Brad, you started pouring your beer, I thought you were just pouring it into empty space.
Hello. But, there you go. It's there.
It's all good. It's all good. Lots of familiar faces in, lots of Patreons. Thanks for joining us. Somebody from Portugal, which is where we can no longer go, I believe, as of a couple of hours ago.
It's sort of amber coloured. This isn't really amber coloured, actually. I was going to say amber coloured like the beer. But it's now moved up, hasn't it, to a danger zone, Johnny.
Danger zone. Cool. So I think it's about time that we brought all the brewers on. I hope you got your subcultures ready, and if not, let us know what you're drinking. Smells bloody marvelous, right? We'll just check they're all ready. They're all there. They're all ready. They're all primed. So let me get rid of my banner so we can see their
very
beautiful
excitingly, Johnny. We've got someone who's on the road that's going to be broadcasting from like a moving vehicle, which we've never done. It's a bit like Speed, the film, the classic Keanu Reeves movie, except his name's
Keanu or Sandra.
Yeah, well, he's Jasper. In that dynamic, maybe Dennis Hopper. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, maybe.
He's got a package. He's put this package of beer that's gonna make us. I'm very heartburny, essentially.
There we go, and we're already off the rails. Right, so we're very excited to add to the stream Stu from Yonder.
Hello.
Jasper from Yonder. Seamless.
Yeah.
And then Danny and Tom from Little Earth. Welcome, guys.
Hiya.
Thanks so much for joining us. It's very exciting. So many firsts. It's our first Mixed Firm live show, and it's our first double header, and our first carpool karaoke edition. So Jasper's going to give us a song about halfway through. I didn't even think about the fact you'd be drinking in the car. What are the police going to think when they go by? Just a dude live streaming, drinking.
In glassware as well, which is very brave. I hope you're not going off any bumpy roads right now.
I just have to tuck down if I ever see a police car. Brilliant.
All right. Well, let's start with before we dive into talking about the first beer. Let's start with Tom and Danny. We'd love to hear about where you guys are at the moment, and tell us a little bit about Little Earth for anybody that doesn't know.
Go on.
So we're Little Earth Project. We're based in Suffolk, which is in the east of England. We've got a very small brewery next to a pub that we've just reopened in the last month. We've been going since 2015, and we only brew mixed fermentation beers. Most of them are barrel aged. All the ones we've got tonight are. Yeah.
There we go.
We're coming from you live from the pub right now. It looks like we're in a barrel, actually. I'm really enjoying the You're also aged in wood. But yeah, we've been working in the pub all day, so we just figured we'd stick around a little longer and do this here as well.
Yeah, we've done a live show with you before, actually, thinking about it. So this is our second Mixed Firm, and we were sat almost exactly where you guys were.
Yeah. We thought it worked well last time, so we'd do it again.
Yeah. There you go. Well, so it's another first in that it's the first time we've had a brewery on for a second time. I'm going to stop talking about first because clearly I'm wrong about most of these. Well, it's a pleasure to have you on. We will be getting to the Raspberry Sour 2020 after we've dived into subculture. Stu, tell us a little bit about Yonder, and then we'll get tasting through subculture.
So we're based in the Mendip Hills of Somerset, so just south of Bristol. Quite a remote location, beautiful scenery. I might be able to show you some of it actually. Not really. There's a barrel. There you go. And some fields. There's some sheep over there somewhere as well. So yeah, we've been here just coming up to 3 years, brewing similar beers to these guys, mixed firm, barrel aged, but also lagers, pale ales and those sorts of beers as well, usually with a little bit of a Yonder spin on it, being locally sourced ingredients or in some cases foraged as well. So me and Jasper started the business back in 2018, and we're still here, which is the main thing. And we've got a tap room now as well, which is where I'm sitting right now, in front of the tap room.
In the Yonder tap room.
Yeah, without an O. Yeah.
Yeah. Still looks great.
I'll get it fixed by Saturday when we're open.
So last time we've come down. We've actually done 2 videos with you guys, but this is the first time you've had the tap room. I've never seen this. It looks really amazing.
Yeah, we used to open up the other side of the building, once every other month or something like that back in 2019. And when we got to the end of lockdown this year, we thought, right, we're just going to go for it. We're going to open every weekend. We'll invest a little bit into this container, and just put on a bit of a party every Saturday, really. So it's a nice addition to our little setup here.
Awesome. So let's dig into the first beer. Tell us the concept and the recipe of Subculture.
So this is a really fun beer to talk about. Actually, one of my favorites, because actually the process for what is, what can look like just a standard pale ale in some ways, is brewed very differently to that. This is actually 2 beers that are brewed separately, with different cultures. One of them very hoppy with different strains of Brettanomyces for that funky edge, and then the other part is acidified with our mixed culture of lactic acid bacteria and another Saccharomyces yeast. And then we blend them together to taste, basically. So you've got that hoppiness and that funkiness and acidity that you wouldn't be able to get if you just created this as one beer, basically. And obviously you can taste the hops in there as well. Quite fruity hops, but it is 100% UK hops, new varieties, which again we're really, really proud of, because the hop development in this country is moving really quickly, trying to keep up with American hops and hops from all around the world that people are used to. And traditionally, I think people think of English hops as a bit more sort of twiggy and bitter, don't they? But actually, there's some amazing flavors in English hops that we wanted to showcase in this beer, and that little bit of acidity as well, I think, brings that fruit flavor forward. So yeah, it's a fun beer to talk about, and it's a great beer to drink on a hot day as well.
It's incredibly grapefruity. Like that little bit of acidity along with that hoppy character just means it's just all out grapefruit. It's amazing.
The hop that really sings actually in the blend is Jester. So there's Jester and Olicana, both are quite fruity. The pairing with the acidity, I think, is the thing that makes it. You're right there.
And tell me about these new British varieties. What is being done differently that's creating these flavors in these new hops? Is it just the interbreeding or changes in process?
I think it's the interbreeding more than anything. Obviously, a big thing that affects flavor is the climate, isn't it? The light and the heat that you'll get on the crops. I mean, I must admit, I'm not an expert in hop growing, so feel free anyone to jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. But I think it's the crossbreeding that predominantly achieves these flavors. And there's some really good varieties coming through as well that we're trialing. I'm trying to think of some names of varieties, but the yield of these crops is so small at the moment that it's hard to get enough, commit to enough volume of them to brew big batches of beer.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember, so full disclosure, I did some consultancy with Yonder and was working with you guys when it first came out, and this beer has come on leaps and bounds. Like, it's like really got a really dialed in and really different hop character to it now that's absolutely beautiful, and it's still also got that little bit of kind of hedgerow earthiness as well of a British hop that I think is really nice on it, because it adds another element to to the profile of the beer.
Yeah, we really dialed in the dry hopping actually with T90 pellets and leaned a bit more towards the heavy use of the jester to get that grapefruit flavor. So yeah, the hoppy side of it I think has definitely developed since you probably last tasted it. Now, this is quite a fresh batch as well. So the good thing about this beer being quite hoppy but also being mixed culture is when we first can it, obviously the hops will dominate, and then as it develops in the can, flavors of Brett can kind of take over when the hops fade and that sort of thing. So this, you don't often hear much about aging in can, do you really? But it's a good one to maybe buy a 6-pack, drink a few, and then save a few for later.
I was going to say, like, you don't see many mixed fermentation beers in can because of, I guess, the inherent risk of an event.
Yeah.
Is there any further fermentation happening, or you're certain that sort of come to an end and it's just the aging that's happening now?
It's completely dried out, so there's no fermentables in this at all. That is it's all taken care of, so we can be confident about nothing causing any problems there.
Goddamn bird song coming in. That's amazing. All I hear is fucking sirens out this side. Tom and Danny, are you drinking this beer?
Yeah.
What this is good fun because we can ask another brewer what they think. What do you think of the beer?
I think it's great. I think it's really well balanced. It's got a lot going on for a beer that's not too strong. Only 4.5%. There's kind of a perceived body there, even though it's obviously quite dry. And the hops work really well with that kind of that kind of breathy, slightly funky nose that's going on. I really like it.
We've got a couple of questions from people asking about hops, and obviously you guys grow some hops. So Chris Brown was asking, are British hops mostly still from the southeast for the weather, or are they grown in lots of other places?
I think they're kind of mainly grown in the places where they were traditionally grown. So in places like Kent and Sussex, and but also further west in England. I know in Herefordshire there's some places that grow hops, and I also know that 6 Degrees North were experimenting and growing some hops in Aberdeenshire of all places.
Yeah, you need sunshine for hops, don't you? That's a bold move. Are you still growing your hops on that field?
Yeah, in fact, we planted another 100 plants this winter, so we've now got 300 plants up there.
Amazing, and that's all sort of classic British varieties, is it, or were there any?
The ones that we put in this year, we actually put in some Cascade, Centennial, Brewer's Gold, and Chinook.
Right.
Kind of not so traditional British varieties, and we'll see how they go.
Have you had any British Cascade or Centennial or anything previously?
We haven't used any in our beers. In fact, interestingly enough, I ordered some today.
Yeah, I should find out what's going to happen to these hops.
It's all part of the experiment.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question on the hops. Is the best reputation of American hops from something inherent to the climate, or is it just the UK hasn't had the same investment in developing new varieties that suit our climate?
I think it's partly to do with there was lots of hops developed in the 60s and 70s in the UK, and lots of them brewers didn't want to buy them at the time because they had fruity flavors. So traditionally, lots of hops that have been developed that have had kind of flavors of mango and lemons and citrus, people haven't wanted them, and they were kind of discarded. And obviously nowadays, brewers are looking for kind of a really fruity, more in-your-face flavors rather than the kind of traditional British hops. So I think they're digging up some of these older, these hop varieties that were developed kind of 40 odd years ago, and trialing them again.
I think
sorry, Danny.
No, I was just gonna say, I think a lot of it's also kind of in the same way Tom was saying, like driven by demand as well. Like, whereas I think traditionally people wanted to have a very regular, consistent beer, whereas now it's quite normal, trendy, however you look at it, to be releasing a new kind of popped experimental beer every couple of weeks. So there's kind of that demand for new things as opposed to keeping it the same pale ale with the same hops every time. You know, people want to find something new, something exciting. So now there is a little bit more investment in finding things that taste better that we can grow here, or that we don't have to spend as much in importing and that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, I think we've seen a bit more investment in the actual processing of the hops as well. Like up at Brookhouse in Herefordshire, you know, there's I think quite a bit of money's gone into that, into that company and into the processing that they're doing, as well as the hops that they're growing. If anyone wants to see that facility, they're on the same site as Little Pomona Cider as well. So you can go drink at Little Pomona and then spice some hops if you go in sort of August, September time and have a poke around maybe. We were down at,
is that where you lost your exhaust pipe, Johnny?
That's no, actually, I lost the exhaust pipe on the way up to where Susanna and James of Little Pomona live.
Okay.
It's their path, so it's their fault. And maybe one day they'll get a letter from me going, "You owe me," or rather, Arctic Motors of Kentish Town a bit of money. But yeah, no, the drive up to Brookhouse is well paved. What was I going to say? Yes, we also went to Hewkins Hops down in Kent, and they were digging out. They dug out Bullion, which was previously used in Guinness. It was the bittering hop for Guinness until they switched to, I think, Slovenian bittering hops because they had a higher alpha. And they dug out Bullion now, and apparently it's kind of Amarillo-esque, like really orangey if you use it right at the end. And 5 Points made a Bullion Best Bitter last September, I think, if memory serves. So yeah, there's lots of exciting stuff happening in British hops. And we're definitely getting there with some new exciting varieties. And Subculture is tasting absolutely banging, Stu and Jasper. Really good.
It is.
Cheers. So I know that everybody before these shows tends to crack the beer a little bit early as you're waiting. So we'll move on quickly from this and onto the next beer, which is the Little Earth Project Raspberry Sour. I enjoy saying that, and everybody's suddenly like, "Oh my god!" So while we're cracking this and pouring it, do you want to tell us a little bit about this, other than, I guess, having raspberries in and being sour?
Okay, so this is just it's a very, very small batch beer. So this was just one barrel of beer, which it's an old wine barrel that's been used quite a few times by us before for just our standard golden sour. And occasionally we'll pick a barrel out and kind of think about what fruit would be good added to that particular barrel. And this one, it had a little bit of a punch to it, but not too much. And we had these raspberries from a local farm, 2 miles down the road. And they basically supply the local co-ops down here, and we pick up the stuff that isn't pretty enough for the supermarket shelves. We only had a relatively small amount of these raspberries, so we wanted to. We paired it with a beer that wasn't too over the top, kind of flavour-wise. We wanted it to be quite a delicate, subtle beer, but still have that kind of a sour character, and also kind of a yeasty, funky character as well.
It's a beautiful colour, really sort of proper sort of blush kind of pink, which is really lovely. What
The ones we put when they were here.
So that was going to be one of my questions. It wasn't the raspberry one that was being filled when we came up.
I don't think so. No. I think it was
raspberries going in it, didn't it? I remember that on the table.
Yeah, was that Jim Jam? I think that might have been the barley wine.
Yeah, because this was last summer, so it wouldn't have been.
Yeah, it might have been a barley wine. Yeah, you might have been right. I think it was pretty strong, what it was going in. So obviously, you know, there's this huge craze, which maybe Stu can talk about. Wait, Stu's that way. About, you know, really heavily fruited beers, which Stu's just sort of been releasing. But when you're looking to pair up a particular liquid with a particular fruit, is it always the fruit that comes second for you guys, or do you try to sort of plan something knowing where you're going to be putting it in?
It's a bit of both, actually. We normally kind of know what we're going to have available during the summer, but it does change from year to year, and sometimes we'll have a lot more of one fruit than we thought we would. Last year we didn't have that many raspberries, but we kind of had a couple of things that we wanted to do with them, and with this particular beer, I kind of wanted it to be something that was really easy drinking, and something that would mainly actually be put into kegs to be sold at the pub here. So it's a very, very small amount of bottles, but something to kind of sit in a beer garden with. But because it takes so long to develop, we kind of have to think about, what will this beer be good for drinking in 12 months time? So these were raspberries from last summer, and we're already thinking about how we were going to sell it this summer.
So there's a lot of like trying to look for potential as much as there is like, hey, that would taste nice with raspberry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very based on season as well, because there's lots of barrels that you might taste over the winter that you might think would go with fruit, but because we've experimented a bit with purees, but we do kind of prefer to be able to either go out and forage for the ingredients or just source it locally. That there isn't really a lot of raspberries locally in Suffolk in February, so we are slightly limited to that. But yeah, we kind of have a general idea of kind of different things that are available before we, even just going into spring, like kind of sourcing what kind of fruit is available and what, people kind of depending on the weather might know what they might have more of. And then we can kind of start
forward planning a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit of but a lot of it is just quite experimental.
And tell us a little bit about the yeast that you use. Is most of that funk coming from the barrel, or do you have a house culture that you pitch into all of these beers?
So our house culture comes from a cider that we also make. So it's just a natural cider. We take local apples, we press them, and then the juice just spontaneously ferments with the juice. Oh, that's one of our old
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's not focusing.
That's our high res label.
There it is.
Yeah. So the yeast mix that we pitch comes straight from the cider. So it changes every year. What we do is we basically just pick one or two of the best barrels of cider, take the yeast from them, and use that as what we pitch into the barrels for that year. So you do sometimes get a cidery character to some of the beers, but by the way the cider ferments and reacts during fermentation, we kind of know what we're dealing with in terms of the mixture of bugs in that culture.
And so I'm really interested when you said that it does vary from year to year. Is that something that sort of only you notice, or is it something you notice in the process, or is it, really like, oh, that's a 2019 bottle and that's a 2018 bottle?
You mainly notice it in the process, but sometimes there'll be certain kind of flavor characteristics that come from a certain season. So the first year that we brewed, all the beer dried out quite a lot, so it fermented very, very dry. And then the year after, it wasn't quite so dry, and then it went a little bit dry, and it kind of does that every year. And sometimes there'll be a sometimes the beers will be a little bit more kind of Brett and funky forward, and sometimes they'll be a bit more have a bit more of that lactobacillus character, some sourness to them. So it does, it changes, and you do notice it. But once you've left a beer for a little bit of time, they kind of all smooth out to something fairly similar.
Right. So it is a matter of time, and they'll just get there in different ways each year.
Exactly.
Yeah. Something I'd love you to talk about. I should have said when we were doing the intro, but also as well as like the amazing place where yeast comes from, the name and the kind of ambition of the brewery. I remember when I did the article on Good Beer Hunting was really interesting to me, and the sort of the inspiration from Jester King. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the name Little Earth Project comes from an interview with one of the owners of Jester King in Austin, in Texas. And he was talking about his breweries and his ambition for the brewery to represent the little piece of earth that they've got locally. So they've kind of got a little bit of land there that they can forage on, and they want to grow some ingredients on. And we kind of wanted to do the same thing. So do something that represents where we are, rather than brewing beers that can be brewed anywhere. Mm-hmm. So we grow some of our own barley, and in the next few years we're going to be working with a local organic farmer to grow some more barley as well. We grow some of our own hops. We forage fruit in local hedgerows and around the little field that we have. And we also try to use local fruit farmers for local fruit. We've got our own borehole on site for our own water that we don't treat at all. And obviously the yeast comes from local cider apples.
Amazing. The greatest regret in my life is I was in Austin and didn't manage to get to Jester King. And I tell everyone whenever we mention it, but one day I will get there. I hesitate to go to Jasper, but I'm going to do it before I go to Stu. Oh no, Jasper's frozen. I'm going to leave him for now. Stu, what do you think of this beer?
It's really good. I think I can imagine drinking this on a really hot summer's day. It's really refreshing, and that acidity is full of character, isn't it? These guys sent us a bottle of cider that I'm really excited to try as well, because I haven't tried the cider yet. And if that character is anything like this from the same cultures, then that's going to be amazing on a hot day as well.
Is the cidery still in the shed at the cottage, or has your dad expanded?
The cidery is still there. He wants to move it out. So I think the kind of longer term plan is to move the cider making down to the pub here, and then in the autumn do kind of community cider making days, and kind of show people how it's done and how cider's made in the simplest way. So just pressing apples and putting the juice into barrels, letting it ferment, and that's it.
There you go. So it's going to be a part of the future of Little Earth. It's not sort of something that will disappear when your dad gives it up.
No, we kind of when we first started Little Earth, we wanted to kind of we had a brewery here that was mainly doing cask beer, and our kind of ambition was to see how we could combine the cider making business with a beer making business, and combine those processes as well. So going forward, we want to do that more and more. So we want to produce some really interesting natural ciders as well as beers, and also maybe make some drinks that are a bit of a hybrid between the two.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've got one of those coming in a bit, so that would have been a nice link, but I can see that Jasper has a good signal. So Jasper, tell us what you think of this beer, if you can unmute. James Corden's smoother than this. I knew it was a risk going to our man in the field.
Roving reporter.
Okay, we'll come back to you, Jasper. Not quite sure
Maybe
what's going on.
I'll get a sign or something.
It's good. Bradley, you haven't said a word.
No, I'm just listening. I'm just reminiscing about going around that. Well, we called it a shed, but it's more of a like little backwoods cabin. And I remember we were walking through the orchard that was by that lovely house. And I think, did we go there what did we turn up in? We went in a nice little car, I seem to remember. It's all very romantic. And then we went.
That's not how I read the situation, Brad.
Romantic. I mean, like idyllic. I don't mean romantic.
Oh, okay. Right. Yeah.
Three hairy dudes that were going in a garden shed. Wasn't that kind of romantic? It was great. And it felt like it'd been there forever, as did the orchard. And I just thought it was very special, like the sort of the location that it was in, and it felt like part of your family and stuff. So I thought, and the fact that you use that, you're taking that from the cider and you're getting all the yeast from it and you're putting it into the beer. I think that's like really unique and an amazing sort of thing that you obviously bring to all of your beers, which makes them taste so unique. I mean, this is just wonderful. It was really jammy when I sort of first got my nose in it, and then a bit kind of more balsamic-y, and then it just sort of like sherbety and just amazing. Just love it. Cheers.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant as well. So we've had two really, really strong starts. I'm hesitant to say let's move along because A, I don't want to neck that, and B, that'd be 2 beers in half an hour. So if there's any questions out there that we've missed, please do flag them now in the comments, particularly around this beer, and we can definitely dig into that. Tom and Danny, so there was a cask ale brewery beforehand. Was it sort of a decision to sort of go, you know what, this isn't what we love, we want to do something that's a bit more representative of where we are? Or was it like cask being a tricky format to be commercial with? What made you switch so entirely from British cask to mixed fermentation beer?
To be honest, it was probably a bit of both. So even with the cask brewery, we had this little field where we were growing the barley for the cask beer that we were making. We didn't quite think it kind of showcased that enough. And we've also obviously got a pub here, and we want people to come to the pub because there's something really unique and something really different going on. And kind of just having some cask beer, that whatever you do with cask beer, you've got to sell it within a few days, and selling 72 pints of something really out there in a few days in a country, it's not very easy. And we also just had a real interest in mixed fermentation beer, and obviously had been doing the cider for some time anyway. So it just seemed the natural thing to do. We growing a bit of ingredients. We had a brewery. We had a kind of a place that makes natural cider. We want people to come here and try something interesting, and give people a reason to come here and camp or stay in the cottages that we have here. So it seemed like the right thing to do.
Another question that I remembered I wanted to ask was kind of to Stu, actually, which is, so Tom and Danny mentioned purees. What's the difference from both a flavor and a technical sort of brewing perspective of using purees and whole fruits? Because obviously you use both in abundance at Yonder.
Yeah, so obviously puree is a lot more processed, not just juiced or pureed, but pasteurized, basically cooked, isn't it? So the flavor is different. So you can get almost like a stewed fruit flavor from purees as opposed to fresh fruit. And I think the other advantage of fresh fruit with beers like this, the really wild stuff, is that you've got these great cultures anyway, whether it's, you know, something that you've created from single strains or something from more spontaneous, like these cider cultures. But as soon as you add that fruit, you're adding to those cultures as well. So it takes it or it can take it in a completely different direction. And that's really exciting. I think it's, you know, you're adding not just a little bit of something grown locally for the fruit flavor, but for the way it ferments and ages as well. But if you put that in a beer that you want to control more, whether it, you know, you don't want it to be too dry or too funky, then purees are the way to go. I think there's quite a big argument for the yield that you can get in the end product sometimes as well, with, you know, separating the beer from the fruit can be quite difficult sometimes. So purees can be an advantage there as well. I was talking to another cider maker, actually, Martin from Pilton Cider, who said to me, I have no idea why brewers just get a load of fruit and chuck it into their beer. Why don't they juice the fruit and add it that way? You don't get all that loss and stuff, which is quite an interesting perspective, actually, because he just juices everything. He makes fruit ciders with natural fruit and puts them through the press. So you can use, you know, whole fruit and get those same results that you get from puree as well. So that's something that's worth experimenting with.
It's a really interesting question, yeah, because I was trying to find links for the next beer, and I was about to ask about, you know, tannins. If you break down a fruit into puree, do you still get tannins from the skin and stuff? But obviously, yeah, from apples, you juice it, you know, the skins are never really involved, and there's tannins there, and there's wild yeast there as well. So yeah, it does seem a bit strange.
I think when you're using things like, a good example would be whole cherries or plums, getting the stone in there can add a lot to the flavor. You know, that kind of almondy flavor that some people, I guess, worry about sometimes with cherry stones and apricot kernels and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think using whole fruit, definitely different flavor in those circumstances as well.
Mm-hmm. We've got some questions coming through. Andy Topamas, how much raspberries did you use and how long did they sit in the barrel?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I know off the top of my head how many raspberries went in, but kind of in the grand scheme of things, when you see these big fruited beers, or even kind of fruited beers that from lambic breweries, it was a very, very small quantity in this particular case.
It was like 15, 20 like punnets.
So yeah, it was something like not many grams per litre.
I'm really racking my brain to try and remember. I think like the absolute top end lambics are about 25 grams per litre of raspberries and stuff like that. Obviously then sort of blended back at the final blend for re-fermentation and stuff, but I guess we're talking a couple of grams per litre.
Yeah, it would be a few grams per litre. We didn't really want it to be kind of a full-on kind of in-your-face raspberry beer. We wanted it to be a nice barrel-aged sour beer that has some raspberry character.
Mm-hmm. A quick way, I'm sure there might be some people just wondering this. I don't think I've seen any questions. Just about the carbonation in your beers is always very, very low, and that's a conscious choice, correct?
We aim for the carbonation to be a little bit low. There's a little bit of fizz in this in the bottle we had, but yeah, the carbonation is on the low side. I don't think really high carbonation suits our beers, and also our beers tend to ferment, carry on fermenting. So if you leave a bottle for another few years, it will probably have more carb than it does now.
Right.
We've actually doing that, so we've started leaving bottles longer before we release them.
Somebody's just read your bottle and it says 20 kilograms.
It's probably 20 kilograms.
The first thing I thought was, I should look at the bottle quick because I wrote those labels, but I should. I did say 15 to 20 punnets, and I think each punnet was about a kilo, so
there we go.
Not far off.
So that would be in just over 200 litres. So it's actually a fair amount, but it's not as much as you'd use if you wanted a real punchy kind of deep pink, reddy coloured raspberry beer.
Yeah. I like Callum's comment. Just you put on your labels punnets per batch, not grams per litre. Chris King, any tips for using fruit when homebrewing? I guess the first question would be: should people get whole fruits or should they try and get purees? Because I'm sure they're all available online.
I think the great thing about homebrewing is you can experiment because it's such a small batch, isn't it? So do both, do everything, try it all. Maybe split a batch, put some puree in one and some whole fruit in the other, and see what they taste like side by side.
And then you can blend them if you want to get the perfect variation between the two.
The next big thing, then.
Yeah. There was another question. How to deal with gone-off fruit in terms of brewing wild ale? Is there anything? Is there such a thing as too ripe?
Feed it to the cattle, probably.
Yeah, when we clean out the barrels, the birds tend to take care of it.
There we go.
Yeah, I think if fruit's gone off, I wouldn't want to use it. I think if it's very, very ripe, you're obviously dealing with a slightly different product. And if the fruit is underripe, you're going to have more sugars there and less acidity if something's very ripe. So yeah, you're just kind of dealing with a slightly different product.
So it's just understanding how ripe it is and adjusting accordingly.
Yeah, I think taste the fruit before you put it in, and you know what you're dealing with then.
Yeah, if you wouldn't eat it, don't put it in here.
Don't put it in your beer. Yeah.
There we go. Sorry, you going to say something else, Danny?
I was just going to say, when you guys were visiting, the raspberries that we were using, I think, remember, like, they were basically just falling apart in our hands.
They were very ripe.
They were very ripe.
But they still
had a good flavour.
Had a good flavour. Yeah, they weren't good enough for the supermarkets, but they were still.
I also remember that you didn't have a funnel, so it was.
Oh, it was hands over.
The thing which, made for some great photos. But probably wasn't ideal for you guys. Friend Sunset asks, which breweries really interest you guys?
We drink everything. We really enjoy, all the different mixed ferm beers coming out of the UK right now. Stuff from Yonder, Mills, we really enjoy their stuff. We tend to try and get all their releases when we can. Burning Sky is a huge one for us. I sometimes wish that we could do, cleaner beers as well as the mixed ferm stuff. We just don't have the facility or the size for it. But, really love that, there's lots of brewers out there that are capable of brewing both or all of those kinds of styles. And they're all amazing. So, just about everything. We've also just been drinking a lot of lager lately. It's not just, just in the pub. We've got Brightbrook on, which we really enjoy. I think they make some really excellent lagers. Utopian.
Lager and mixed ferm stuff.
Yeah, lager and mixed ferm.
The stuff like Mills that's hard to get. Do you guys sort of exchange? Is there like a code where you're like?
Well, we did do a collaboration with them
nearly 2 years
ago now in August, and ever since then, and they've come to visit to stay in the cottages here before, but not for any brewing purposes, just to actually have a holiday. So we're kind of on their list. So luckily now that we've got the pub, we tend to get offered a case of whatever they release, which is rather handy for our growing beer fridge offering in the pub. So
yeah,
and for our own.
If we come to your pub, then you can potentially get Mills that you wouldn't be able to get other places.
Yeah. Our new manager Benjamin's been like working on building out the fridge. He's a big mixed ferm nerd as well, so he's really into it. We've got all sorts. We've got Mills in there right now. We've got some Tommy Chef. We've got some Trillium. So all sorts, loads of stuff from some dry Fontaine, all sorts. So it's a pretty good mix, as well as of course all of our stuff. So,
we will be coming to camp soon.
Yeah, that might be the case. It's really good. It's really exciting. It's nice to have a manager who's like super keen to build that and really know a lot about mixed ferm and just beer in general and be working with us on that. So it's quite exciting.
Yeah. Stu, what about you? What breweries have you been really enjoying? Are you on a lager trip as well?
In the summer that's definitely a go-to, but I would definitely agree with Burning Sky as well. Is big, always been a big inspiration. The beers that they make, but I think mixed ferm in the UK, there's some great stuff out there, and you used to have to go quite far to find it, didn't you? Whether it was in Belgium or stuff imported from the States, but you just don't need to now, because people like Little Earth and what's the I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. Is it Pastore or Pastor?
Yeah.
Those beers, and there's people coming on board all the time, like Daya's mixed ferm stuff now as well. Everyone kind of wants to have that side project, which I think is great for the mixed ferm beer scene in the UK. And obviously, Wild Beer Co are pretty close to here as well. Probably shouldn't miss those guys out. They're just 20 minutes from here.
The OGs of the mixed firm UK scene, mixed firm scene. Have either of you guys tried any crossover beers yet? I'm very excited to try them, but haven't.
No, the guys actually came and visited. Tom, I don't think I was here that day, but they came and visited about a year or two ago.
Oh, it was a few years ago.
I think when they were just starting to get planned.
Yeah.
Planned out and kind of quizzed Tom. got lots of info. But we haven't actually managed to get any of their releases yet. But I love this thing. I mean, their barrel store is incredible. It's far larger than anything I think we could even build on site. So it's quite exciting, and it's quite cool to see more people.
Guys, but we did have a super chat come in from Joss that just said, "Love and beer to everyone. Hope you're having a lovely time. The beers indeed so Suffolk and good."
Strong, Josh. Strong.
Worth it. Yeah.
Right, I think it's time for beer number 3. So if we could all pretend the last 10 minutes haven't happened, and I can make that glorious link between hybrid ale and cider. Stu just realized he doesn't have a Serpens next to him. This is our next beer. So, Stu, tell us all about it, and I'm going to read the label so that we don't have a 20 kilogram situation again.
I can probably actually, because this was brewed. I say brewed. It was blended. No, actually, yeah. So we would have brewed it middle of last year. The apples would have been harvested the end of last year, autumn, and then we would have blended it around January or February. So yeah, in terms of the freshest fruit, there's it's all in there, and it's also fresh in my memory because it was quite recent. So it's close to 40% apple juice from 2 different apple varieties, which I think are on the bottle. I'm going to refresh my memory. Tremolets bitter and Brown's apple, one of which is really dry and tannic, and the other is a bit sweeter. So it's kind of a blended apple addition that complements the wild ale portion of this beer. So the wild ale is fermented with our mixed cultures, which include various different strains of Brettanomyces, Pediococcus, and some standard French saison yeast as well. which is kind of our house culture that we've been building up over a period of time. And we get very reliable flavors from this of almost like pineapple juice, which is quite strange to get those really tropical fruity flavors just from wild fermentation. But because it's so fruity, it goes really well with the apple here. And for the I mentioned Martin from Pilton Cider earlier, so this is a collaboration with him actually. So he sourced the apples from a small orchard near us in South Somerset. Pressed them for us, and sent I think it's 500 litres over. Left-handed Giant actually took some juice at the same time, I think. So there's a bit of almost a cooperative down here. When Martin does something, he kind of reaches out to breweries and says, do you want some juice, or do you want some, apple pomace or something like that, some leftovers to flavour. So yeah, it's a good little cooperative down here. But yeah, the idea was kind of a nod to our roots, really, because although we don't make cider, there's a lot of cider in Somerset. Obviously, it's quite well known for farmyard cider, and it's kind of what we grew up on. Not like we were fed it as children or anything like that, but it's kind of in our roots as something you go down the pub and drink rather than, or as well as, a best bitter or something like that. So making these beers with local ingredients, it was always on our minds that when we do one with cider apple juice, it needs to be a big percentage, a big whack, and as well as complementing those wild ale flavors, it needs to taste like, as much as we can, like cider without it obviously being a cider. So we were trying to keep in as much apple flavor as we could by fermenting the juice with the beer very, 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 very cold temperatures, so that it doesn't push off all that fruit flavor. And the results of this, and yeah, I'm really proud of this beer.
I think it's amazing. Like, there's loads of sort of really green apple skin on the aroma. On the finish, I love it because it's tannic and it's bitter, which is not something you often sort of see combined. But what it creates is, along with that Brett, loads of sherbet and like just an explosion of a finish. And then it's got that lovely kind of honeyed little bit of caramel malt thing, but also loads of kind of slick apple juice fruitiness. It's so complex, but so absolutely crushable. I love it.
It's changed over time as well, actually. Just tasting this now, it's probably a month or so since I've had one of these, but yeah, you described the green apple skin flavor, and yeah, that's something that's definitely developed more recently. So I'm glad it's headed in that direction to make it more appley, seeing as it's a beer cider hybrid, or graph, I guess is the other name for it, isn't it?
Yeah, so we tried to dive into the history of graph, and it seems to be entirely invented by is it Stephen King, I think?
Okay.
It was the author Stephen King, wasn't it? Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it was Stephen King. Stephen King, somebody in the comments is bound to know this, but I'm pretty sure that the actual term, so ale and cider hybrids have existed for a long time, but the term graph is literally from a book by Stephen King. I think it's called like The Towers, or The Two Towers, or The Dark Towers, or something. Oh, yeah. And yeah, he called it graph in that. And then like producers all over the world went, is that what it's called? And I think The Dark Tower, there we go. Ben from Filmbusters is on it. Oh, Brad, did you just bring it up and then I closed it? Sorry. So yeah, the actual term graph is from a Stephen King novel, but it has been around. He must have heard of that style from somewhere, but it didn't have a name. It was just called a hybrid.
So he has got all the credit for it then, or he deserves the credit for it, or
for the name.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Not for making. He doesn't make.
Not as far as I know. Okay. Although if I were him, when I saw the craft beer boom and the natural cider boom happening, well, no, he's got enough money, I think, Stephen King, hasn't he?
It's probably right.
couple of books and movie deals.
Just a couple.
So, well, maybe it would have been a nice hobby of his. But anyway, I'll email Stephen King later and tell him he's missed a trick. Little Earth Peeps, what do you think of this?
I think it's lovely. I really like how dry it is. Especially, you know, like it just kind of, I don't know, it's a good one in between, like lots of kind of fruit focused beers. It's really nice to have something that's just really dry. It's a good kind of in the middle refresher. It's really lovely. I could, again, just take loads of it on I guess just beer on a hot summer day.
We were bound to love everything we drank today because of the weather.
It's also really well at the tap, actually. We do have cider here, again from Martin and Pilton Cider, but people actually do veer towards this on draft as well, which is great.
I can imagine, I mean, it's pokey, but I can imagine it being a really lovely draft beer as well. Like a 2/3 of that, I could sweep my way through quite quickly.
I think people like that in a cider as well, though. You know, a bit of a kick.
Yeah, I mean, so natural cider, like one of those moments, particularly in beer, you start to think you've sort of learned it all from a journalistic approach. I could never pretend to have learned it all about brewing, and then every now and then you have these moments that completely blow your mind. And one of them was going to Two Little Pomona and learning properly how sort of natural cider is made, and them referring to it as wine. You know, we put beer and cider together because it's been served by the pint for most of the years that we've been alive, but really it's the same process as natural wine, and the strength of it is, you know, between like 6 and, you know, probably pushing 9% with the amount of sugar in apples, and you don't have that much control over it. So cider always tends to have a little bit of a kick because it's naturally going to reach those levels.
And in that sense, I think it's massively undervalued as well. People kind of perceive cider as it should be a cheap product, but you know, it's so much work goes into making it. I think it shouldn't be viewed in that way at all, especially, you know, natural ciders.
Yeah, and so much time as well, which is makes it very difficult to make a profit on. Ben from Film Busters has just come in with another killer fact. Stephen King's got his characters drinking Allagash White.
So you're pulling the thing there.
Stephen King got taste.
Yeah, he has got taste. That's for sure.
It sounds like we need to get him on the Bubble podcast. I reckon he's got time for a small independent beer podcast, right?
Really?
Yeah. I mean, he can't have much on. I think he'll be up for it. There was another question, and I have lost it like a true professional. Brad, you got anything to say while I dig this out?
No, just that I think this is probably a pretty happy medium for people that maybe are cider drinkers and are wanting to get more into sort of beer, craft beer and stuff. So, I mean, this is I happily drink this all day long in the summertime. I think it's a great summertime drink. So, I think it's interesting. Hopefully we'll get more of this sort of fusion stuff between these two worlds. Because I mean, like, we certainly don't cover cider on the channel at all, but I would love to. I think one day we probably will kind of go down that route a bit more.
I mean, I've done a video on cider, Brad, but
well, you did it in lockdown, mate, while you were making your book, so that was why you got to do it.
I did. I didn't get. You didn't get the invite. Didn't get the memo.
No.
Quite a question, not the one I found a question, but we'll come back to it. Dryness. So we never really get to talk about dryness on the Craft Beer channel because actually a lot of the people we talk about it on the Craft Beer channel, but not in live shows, because a lot of the people that we bring on are sort of New England brewers where there's not a lot of dryness going on. Can you sort of explain what dryness means on the palate, and also, you know, if we would say, you know, a New England IPA was around sort of 10, 12, 10, 15 finishing gravity. These beers are, I presume, pushing like 0, right?
Yeah, pretty much. This one, I think, is 3, maybe, the most.
Right. So that what we're talking about there is final gravity. So it's just the amount of sugar left and it is like a quarter of what you might find in a New England IPA, and that's what leads to that really. God, what is it on the tongue? What does dryness do to the tongue? I'm struggling to find the word for it.
It's weird. It's almost like the opposite, because it makes you like almost immediately start salivating.
Yeah.
So it's almost in the dryness. It's almost like the opposite of.
If your mouth is wet, then the beer was dry.
Yeah.
Exactly. Makes sense, right?
Yeah. No, but yeah, I think that about describes it. To me, it's almost sometimes like when you drink fizzy water, fizzy mineral water, and it's got this kind of chalky, really dry feel to it. That's sort of a similar thing to me for when a beer is really dry, and it's just not something that we're really used to in craft beer, because traditionally beer's always been maybe 10.8 to 10.20ish in this country, and now beers are sort of pushing more towards the 10.20. So mixed firm beers, almost just for safety reasons, to make sure the package doesn't explode, it's got to be way down,
unless it's like a Flanders Red or something like that, which are still quite sweet, aren't they? I think the other thing that adds to the dryness is like the tannins as well, whether it's from fruit like apples or from the barrel aging aspect. It's not just the lack of sugar, but those heavy tannins, which are characteristic in sour beer, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I guess all fruits must have some element of tannin to them. Like we know that grapes do, because you get tannins in wine, and that's in the skins, and then we know that the apples do as well. But I guess raspberries must do to some extent, and other ones that just have a little bit of a thick skin or membrane. I think we might get some in the blackcurrant. Maybe there might be some tannins knocking around. There's a nod from Danny there. So the question that I missed and meant to go back to, I've now lost again, but it was a question. I'll flash it up. But the question was just somebody had missed the point where you said whether the cider and the apple juice and the beer were fermented at the same time, or whether they were blended afterwards. Can you just confirm that, and I'll dig the comment out?
Yeah. So the beer was fermented for the first chunk, and then the apple juice was added afterwards in secondary fermentation to ferment very slowly and keep all that apple flavor in there. It seems to be the best way to do it. There's quite simple sugars in the apple juice, so it doesn't have a problem picking up that fermentation again.
We've got a super technical question. I don't know whether you guys will have the answer to this. But Malakias has brewed a red currant kvike beer that was amazing until in spring it turned sour. I guess that would have depended on the kvike strain. Some of them do go sour and some of them don't.
Could potentially have been the fruit as well.
Or the fruit.
Some lactic acid bacteria on the fruit.
Yeah, that's what I suspect.
There we go. So it would have been slower acting because the fruit went in later and had to do its thing a little bit slower than the yeast had. I hope that helps, Malaki. Yes. But your beer sounds delicious, whether it was sour or not. That sounds awesome. Here's a question from Father Earth. You know how red wine can be quite stiff on the tongue? Stiff.
I think there was a question previous to what tannins are, and I think that's the explanation.
Yeah, so that's
interesting.
It's interesting how we all have different words for what it does to our tongue. Stiff. I don't understand stiff, but if that's what it feels like to you, then more power to you, Father Earth. I feel like you mentioned this briefly, Tom or Danny, but have you guys got hybrid beers or hybrid beers on the way?
We do have a graph out. Well, it's been out for some time. I think probably about a year. Yeah, it was probably right before lockdown last year that we released it. It's called Hard Graph. It's a 750 bottle, and it's same kind of thing. It was 200 liters of the apple juice, so the same kind of stuff that we use for the cider, pressed and added to just a base golden sour.
Yeah.
And then left to re-ferment again. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely got. We had a bottle of it the other night, actually. Kind of bottle with them, and yeah, it's kind of aged now. It's been released for a year, which means it would have been brewed in 2019, probably early 2019.
Yeah.
And it's starting to develop a bit more of a funkier apple vibe versus before when we first released it. It was definitely a lot more of a like fresh, cidery, appley thing. It's gone to the funky side now.
It's very different to this this hybrid because the apple juice that was used was very different. So we used the apple juice that we used to make our own cider here. So it's using East Anglian apples, and basically there's no cider apples grown in East Anglia, so they're all cooking and eating apples. So it was mainly Golden Delicious and Bramley's. So it's kind of had more acidity to the apple juice, but virtually no tannins. But it was blended with a barrel aged beer, so you kind of got a little bit of that coming through as well. So it was kind of it's a similar beer, but it's also a very different
yeah, something we didn't talk about, but you can gain tannins from the oak. Oak has its own, I guess, almost astringency to it, and I guess maybe if it's a wine barrel as well, that increase the chance of tannin.
I think particularly in a red wine barrel,
right.
The way they char it.
Yeah, you can pick up a bit of the tannins from the wine that was in there previously, but yeah, that's not normally in terms of cider. Normally, the tannins are coming from the skins of the fruit.
Yeah, it feels like from my trips to cider makers, they really look for almost no barrel character, but they're quite interested in the spirit character that they might get from using quite wet spirit barrels. So I've had some pretty brutally boozy Oliver ciders that are just, it's basically whiskey, Tom. I'm into it, but
are you doing the right duty on this?
I think part of that is just to do with the process and the way the cider is made. With obviously, if you're using apples, you've got very simple sugars there, and it tends to ferment very quickly. So once the cider's finished fermenting, you want to get it out of the barrel. Whereas with beer, you can kind of introduce more complex sugars and carbohydrates and kind of extend that fermentation period and add more barrel character.
Interesting. There we go. Here's a question.
I was just going to say, obviously cider apples, you're looking for quite different qualities than sort of like an eating apple, potentially. But what would happen because I love a jazz apple, which is obviously a very commercial apple. What would happen if you use the jazz apple to make cider in your shed?
I'm not sure. I wouldn't know until I tried. But
they're incredibly sweet and jazzy, so I just presume it would just be what way all the sugar would just get eaten. And
well, this is the thing. The cider that we make is mainly with apples that you would eat rather than cider making apples. But then there's some Bramleys and some cooking apples in there as well, just to balance it out with some acidity. So if you made a cider with just very sweet apples, you'd end up with something that was probably quite dry because there's just a lot of simple sugars in there for it to ferment. Dry and boozy, basically, I think it would be.
It's definitely the Haribo of the apple world, I think. Very sugary.
But not once you fermented that all out and you're just left with booze.
Yeah.
It's amazing like how delicious cider can be, but when you taste the apples that went into it, you're just like, oh my days. There was, I think it was called a Jersey Chisel that I tried up at Little Pomona, and it literally like chiseled at your tongue. Like I had to have a sip of water. It was that aggressively tannic. But in tiny quantities in a blend, it's a wonderful thing. And it's, maybe a little bit of Jersey chisel would rescue your boozy jazz apple hot cider that you're making in your shed, Brad.
Chisel sounds like something a football hooligan might do to you if you're very unlucky.
If Jersey ever made it to an international tournament, yeah, you'd want to avoid the Jersey fans in case you got chiseled. So there we go. We are derailed again. I think it might be time for beer number, I've lost count. 4. Beer number 4. So we are going back to Little Earth Project for an elderberry sour. Now, I think, I think we're going to have some Monty Python references at some point in the comments. But B, I think lots of people aren't going to be entirely sure what an elderberry looks, smells, or tastes like. So shall we start with, I know, Tom, you're a great lover of the elderberry.
Yeah, I do. Well, the kind of elder plant in general. And this time of year, they're actually just starting to come out. You get elder flowers from these kind of bright white, very small flowers that grow on. Lots of them grow on kind of a head about that big. And they have a very, very unique floral flavour and aroma. Danny is not a fan of elder.
Elderflowers, elderberries.
What's wrong with an elderflower?
I don't know. Actually, I don't know if there's anyone else here from North America, but we were not raised, or at least myself in Canada, was not raised on elderflower flavored things. It's a new flavor to me completely.
I think you're overplaying. By saying we were raised on elderflower, I think you're overplaying how much elderflower existed in our lives.
There's a lot of elderflower in Suffolk. Maybe it's just a Suffolk thing. It's one of those things that you're in the pub. Everyone who comes in goes, "Oh, do you have like an elderflower presse? Or do you have, everything's very elderflower based." It seems to be a lot of it. It's never been a flavor I tried before I got to the UK, and I just can't quite get on board with it. I know I'm not the only one, so you've had some really interesting reviews about our elderflower.
Oh, right, okay.
But the elderberry, once it's in its, it's like when it turns from a caterpillar into a beautiful butterfly. It's much. I much prefer it in the kind of tart. Incredibly, elderberries. We're getting back on the tannic train, but they are incredibly tannic. Yeah, I like them better as a berry than I do as a flower. But I don't hold it against you guys.
This beer is delicious.
It's really good, really nice.
I wish we had some.
That wasn't meant to be a troll, but it's delicious. So yeah, I get that it's really jammy, and I get that kind of more floral quality to it. It's got a lovely, unusual finish as well, because it finishes a bit like a red wine. It's like sweet and full-bodied and then tannic on the finish. I'm going to shut up and drink it. Stu, what do you think, seeing as you actually have one?
I've been really looking forward to trying this, and I'm not disappointed. It is really, really good. Elderberries are delicious. And I've been wanting to do something along these lines for a while, but haven't got around to it yet. We use it mixed with other berries, but I think it really shines on its own. Yeah, you've done a great job here. It's really, really nice. I'm definitely going to be finishing this one.
I don't think I've ever eaten an elderberry before. I've had lots of elderflower flavored stuff, but it's quite different, isn't it? It's delicious.
Yeah, I wouldn't eat a handful of elderberries. Like, I definitely think that the flavor that comes from them being in the beer and kind of mixing with the sour and aging a little bit kind of takes the intensity out. Like, they are quite, you think of like the most intensely dry, full-bodied red wine or something, you can think of it, that kind of like immediate, your whole mouth just kind of puckers.
Wow.
It's quite intense. So it's a really good thing to make maybe a cordial with, or like a kind of make things with, but I wouldn't like snack on them like you would like a handful of raspberries or strawberries or something like that.
They're not particularly high in sugar. They're quite acidic, and the skins have got kind of quite a lot of tannins in them as well. So they're kind of I kind of think of them as like slow berries, but with more flavour and kind of more fruitiness about them. So maybe elderberry gin. Yeah.
I was about to say the same thing.
Yeah.
Do elderberries have any uses, or are they in anything we might know?
They are big. I think. Oh wait, am I gonna get this straight? Is it elderberry or blackberry? I think it's elderberry. I'm pretty sure it's like they're really high in. Please don't quote me. I'm not a health professional. I'm pretty sure they're really high in like a vitamin C or something. Like you get them like.
Is it a cure for COVID? Is that what you're saying, Danny? Everybody should be eating.
Yes, everyone go out there and eat a handful of elderberries. No, I think it's one of these things where like if you go to like Holland and Barrett, there's lots of like little daily gummies and things for kids. They're really good for like your immunity. So potentially.
Again, not a health professional.
Please don't. But yeah, no, I do think they're used in quite a bit of things like that kind of stuff in herbal remedies and things over the years, over time.
Because it's so interesting that elderflower is so apparently wildly popular, particularly in Suffolk, and yet. Other than, the most famous thing about elderberries is that John Cleese says it in a city voice in Monty Python. Really reference it otherwise. No. But it's delicious.
Yeah.
The colours are amazing.
I wish we had more.
Yeah,
so, sorry, go on, Tom.
Just to tell everyone, we sold our last bottle here.
In the pub
by accident, and now have no bottles of it at all. So we haven't even got any to try ourselves tonight. So we're missing out.
Yeah,
we're really rubbing it in as well, aren't we?
Yeah.
We have a keg still. We still have a keg to put in the pub. It's just not on at the minute, so all is not lost. Where have we gone? Somebody's just confirmed. So these are from the same plant. Do they come out at the same time as well?
No. So the elder flowers are kind of pollinated, and like any flower, they kind of turn into a fruit, and they turn into elderberries. So the flowers are normally out this time of year. It's been a bit cool in May, so they're a little bit late this year. So they'll be out in about a week's time. They'll be everywhere. And then the berries themselves, kind of from the start of.
He's left us hanging. He has left us hanging. When are the elderberries out, Tom?
Should we? Let's give a shout out to Lord's Brewing Co. Thanks for the super chat, John. Everything's going great. Hope it's going great with you, man.
Why don't you finish the sentence, Stu? So elderberries come out when?
August, September-ish.
Yeah.
That's I mean, it's seasonal. It's like the elderflower is delayed, isn't it? Because it's cooler, like Tom was saying. So the change in seasons could have the same effect on the berries as well. So it's hard to pin a date on these things, really. You just got to keep your fingers crossed. Like if we were brewing an elderberry beer next week, for example. No, sorry, elderflower beer. And we've planned it in the schedule, and then we're still waiting for these flowers to come through. We're just like praying for the sun, and
I'm coming down next week.
That's what I said. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, so maybe I should cancel that trip. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's fine. So it's also like seasonal. There's differences throughout the country as well. So further down south, Cornwall, for example, it's definitely in flower, and as you go up, it's a bit slower. But also, the higher up you are as well, it seems to be a bit slower. So I know that down in Wells, which is about 10 minutes from here, the Glastonbury area, it's already in bloom. But up here by the brewery, it's probably going to be another 3 weeks. Right. So you've just got to travel to find it, basically.
Yeah. I'm looking out my window right now. There is a school opposite where I currently live, and they have two elderflower plants that are in full bloom. So if you want me to just bring some down,
yeah, just do that.
I don't know whether I should be breaking into a school.
It's fine.
They probably won't believe it if I say I'm just helping craft breweries out. but I can.
It's foraging. Just wear a balaclava or something.
Yeah, that'll make it safer. Yeah. So another question. Obviously, if you pick the flowers, does that mean you don't get the berries?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's why we don't have a lot of berries going on, because the flower's so popular.
Everyone goes mad for cordial, and they leave us with no berries.
Absolutely. Man.
Somebody did ask as well. I know, I don't have one to reference, but they asked what elderberries look like, and it is what is on the label. It's maybe a bit difficult to tell, so we kind of relate to the berries, but that is what the berries look like. That is a picture of the berries we used in this beer.
They're about how big are they? Like
a pea, a little petit pois.
Yeah, less than half a centimeter across. So they're small little berries.
There you go.
Yeah.
Brad's on it.
They look like the sort of thing. If I was in a forest and I didn't know how to get out, I wouldn't eat those because they look like. I don't know what they are. I'm not going to eat those because I don't want to die out here. So I'll play it cool.
All you need to do is just message Stu. Every now and then I message him going, "What's this? Can I eat it?" And usually it's too late by the time he replies. But
if I had a phone, I would be lost in the forest, Johnny.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Please don't put your life in my hands, though.
I have, Stu, multiple times. You just hadn't realised. Let's talk a bit about foraging, because I think that's something that really interests people. Stu, I know it's quite a big part of your identity, particularly on sort of the bottled side of what you do. How did you get into foraging?
It's been kind of a lifelong obsession, really. Started with a kind of weird fascination with fungi as like this weird alien species that didn't fit into any categories, and going out picking mushrooms and identifying them with my dad. And then that moved on to kind of the same reason, but with a culinary angle as well, finding out that actually you can eat some of these weird mushrooms. And I think once you got the bug with foraging, once you're out there and you're kind of identifying stuff and realize that actually there's so many great flavors that you can eat and brew with, especially in our line of work, obviously. I think once you get that bug, it's captivating, and people love to hear about it as well. People, like you said, people will ring you up or send you a picture and say, "What is this?" And I quite often do that to people who are a bit more experienced than me as well. So it's kind of like a chain. So every time you send me a message, I'm actually just forwarding it on. I don't.
That's why it takes a while.
But yeah, it's in the same way that I guess I ended up obsessed with brewing. I got obsessed with identifying mushrooms, herbs, fruits, and that sort of stuff, and figuring out ways to use them. Maybe just got a bit of an obsessive personality.
And you just like to live slightly on the edge.
Yeah, I mean, there have been some incidents actually walking through a forest with my brother, and I was like, "Oh, look, some bilberries, I'll pick and eat those." And he's like, "You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't just pick random berries in the forest and eat them." I think people are quite nervous about it, but you have got to be 100% certain before you eat anything, and I definitely was on that occasion.
What's your favourite mushroom?
That's like asking what my favourite child is. That's very difficult.
Wow, take that, kids. So Stu refuses to answer. Tom and Danny, what's your favourite mushroom?
Well, I quite like big old puffballs fried up in a mix.
Puffballs?
Yeah. Do you know what a puffball is? It's like a giant fungus that's like the size of a football, and you can cut it up and it just tastes lovely, and fry it in some butter, and it's just a tasty thing.
Who's your favourite child, Stu?
They might be watching. Do the puffballs grow in your orchard? Because they quite like apple trees, don't they?
They do, but we have had them occasionally in the orchard, but not every year. But they do grow around here a fair bit.
here's a question for you, Stu. What do you think about mushroom beers? Ever made one of those, Stu?
Yes, I have. Yeah, so at Wild Beer we did a mushroom beer, and it went down quite well. It was quite a fun project, but I feel like I don't really want to brew one again.
That good, eh?
Yeah, well, no, I feel it's just kind of the novelty factor is a bit like there's definitely flavour there, but chaga that was mentioned in that message is a really interesting fungi that grows on birchwood. It's like a hard mass, almost like a growth of wood on the side of the tree that has medicinal uses, and flavour-wise, I wouldn't say it's really mushroomy, and could potentially work very well in a beer, probably in a dark beer. So there's a lot of varied flavours out there. I think that, yeah, mushrooms could work in beer, but I'm not going to rush to brew another one, I don't think.
I'm sure you already know, but the largest superorganism in the world is a fungi.
Yeah.
This sort of thing blows my mind. They're forest wide and they all communicate. They're like a superorganism thing, aren't they, under the ground? And
yes, and like a network of mycelium that covers massive areas, and the mushroom itself is just the fruit, basically, of that organism.
I was listening to radio. I think it was Radio 4, and they're using mushrooms for problem solving because those things are so good at finding roots through like mazes and through different parts of the underground that they've started to use it. They use mushrooms to plan an extension of the Paris underground, I think. So they like put the mushrooms in a mock-up of what's underneath Paris, and it found the best routes.
I think I've seen some sort of like show about that. I can't remember what it was on. I feel like it's on like a Netflix thing, like one of these like how things work kind of.
Ooh, maybe it is.
I've definitely seen something about it. I just can't remember where it was.
We'll work it out, and we'll put at the end of the show we'll put a link to it so that you guys can see that, because it's pretty amazing. Speaking of which, somebody asked if any of us are at Bigfoot. Brad and I will be there. We are running a thing called Hair of the Dog, which is every morning from 11 till 1 p.m. We're basically the hangover entertainment. It's been billed as Hipster Sunday Brunch. So we're just going to have guests. There's going to be music. There's going to be guests, Bloody Mary making competition. No, Michelada making competitions. Circus skills, yoga.
Subraging.
All
kinds of crazy stuff.
What's the worst that could happen? Are either of you guys headed up to Bigfoot?
No, unfortunately not. I'd love to, though.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
When is it?
2 weekends time.
Okay.
Up Ragley Hall. I think it's sold out, so this plug is going to piss some people off. But next year, and it'll be full size, and it'll be amazing. So yes, we will be there, and I think it will be broadcast in some way, so we might be able to show you the chaos that will be Hair of the Dog. Foraging, Tom and Danny. When I came, my wife and I came, and we camped, and we went for a hike, and we found loads of blackberries near your brewery. Do you guys forage local stuff like that frequently?
Yep, we do it all the time. So yeah, it's just coming into the kind of the season where you can forage for things in the hedgerows. So elder flowers are just starting to come out. We've brewed in the past with a plant called Alexander's, which was brought here by the Romans, and that's got some kind of lots of interesting flavors going on with it, because you can use different parts of the plant and they all have slightly different flavors. So the leaves are a bit like parsley, and the stems are a bit like celery, and the seeds and flowers have kind of almost like a cumin kind of flavor to them. But yeah, we blackberries are probably the easiest around here because they basically just grow everywhere. They don't have a massive amount of flavor to them, so we tend to put them in beers where there's also other fruit.
Or nettle. We've done blackberry and nettle.
Yeah,
sours in the
we've
past.
done a blackberry nettle sour. So we brewed this beer that was had no hops in at all. We basically replaced the hops with nettles. And when you brew a beer without any hops and you just pitch a mixed culture in, there's nothing to stop the beer going very sour. So this is going to be restricted by hop bitterness. So we have done in the past brewed kind of a very sour beer and then put blackberries in just to add another kind of layer of complexity to it.
Stu, you've brewed with nettles as well, so apparently it's a thing.
Yeah, it's a delicious thing. It's really good, really herbal, and fantastic ingredients to use, and they're everywhere as well. I was going to say easy to pick, but definitely wear gloves.
Yes, well, that's what we did in our video with you. We put on the marigolds and we went around picking dandelions and nettles.
It's a good book, isn't it?
Yeah, it was an interesting day out. I'm not going to lie to you. What was the yellow petals that we ate that tasted like coconut?
Gorse flower.
Gorse flower. That was a mind blower as well. And the thing that tasted of lime?
That was sorrel. Common sorrel.
Common sorrel. The world is a plate.
It is. It's a delicious plate.
A delicious plate that could kill you.
Just go gravy. Basically, yeah.
Here's a question. Can you explain what Gruit or Gruit is? And have you guys ever made one that sort of resembles the historic Gruits?
I mean, definitely used Gruit herbs, traditional Gruit herbs, but I wouldn't say we've brewed something here that is a traditional Gruit, to be honest.
So traditional Gruit is back in the days before we generally used hops. It was a selection of herbs that used to be used to bitter and have a slight antiseptic quality in ferments, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So what herbs are we talking about here?
Yarrow, sweet gale. There's so many, isn't there? Probably nettles would have been in there as well. Meadow sweet potentially. But yeah, there's so many herbs and so many different flavors that I think people kind of just used what was local to them. That's kind of how things worked back in the day, wasn't it? You didn't import things or travel the country to get something. You just used what was on your doorstep. So if it was lowland, you'd use probably sweet gale, which grows in boggy areas, or if it was highland, it would be heather and that sort of thing. So yeah, there's so many, and you can just mix it all up because you can get it from all over these days.
You did a series of saisons last year that some of them were using those herbs like meadow sweet.
Yeah, we did magnolia in the springtime. So magnolia flower has a really aromatic, almost gingery flavor and aroma. We did woodruff, which is in season now. Fantastic hay-like, almost vanilla flavors, which is definitely a favorite of mine when it comes to foraged herbs. We did an elderflower one that we were just talking about, and we did a meadow sweet one as well, which had it added to our the pineapple like mixed culture flavors that I described. It added to that with like a lychee note. It was a really, really tropical wild ale with no tropical fruit in it whatsoever.
Okay. And just before we move on to the next beer, where we do have a herb used, rosehip saison. Are you ever going to bring that back? Because I love that beer.
Yeah, potentially. We've still got it on here at the tap. It's definitely a favourite for people around here. Whether or not it goes back into can is a different question. I think it's more of a draft beer really for us. It sells really well at certain pubs that want a saison on a rotational line, and it works great to have it here at the tap. So it'll definitely stick around, or a variation of it, maybe with something else forage will certainly be there at some point.
Well, I'll have to come down. Right, let's move on to beer number 5. We're getting to the business end of the evening, and we are moving on to raspberry and Sweet Cicely. So what? Well, actually, before we get into what the hell Sweet Cicely is, tell us the concept of loop.
So loop is a barrel-aged saison or wild ale. It's kind of hard to categorize beers these days. Is it an American style sour saison or is it a wild ale? It just really depends what you write on the label, I guess, doesn't it? But it's aged with our mixed cultures and barrel aged for varying lengths of time, and then blended back together again. So whether the barrel's been sat there for 3 months or 12 months, we'll taste them all, figure out a good blend, and then pick some seasonal ingredients that will work well with that blend. It's usually fruit and some sort of herb that complements it, usually foraged as well. And what we do, it's a Solera style beer as well. So every time we empty those barrels, we fill them straight back up again with the same base beer to ferment and to keep those cultures going. And each time we add a fruit or a herb, it adds to those cultures as well. So it's constantly evolving and developing.
So it's a beer that has lineage right back to the start of Yonder.
Yeah, so we've got about, I think, 25 to 30 oak barrels now, and we've still got that original barrel. And pretty much, all of those loop barrels will have an aspect of that very first loop barrel in there as well, because it's constantly being topped up and blended.
I flashed it up, but we do have a super chat just from a cowboy in Sweden saying, "Tom and Danny, great work. Please keep it up." And
we will.
I'd like to do. I think we can all echo that statement. So we've got raspberry. Are we talking whole raspberry, forage raspberry, bought-in raspberry, raspberry puree? What kind of raspberry?
So this isn't forage raspberry. So the only times I've really foraged raspberries, I've ended up with a bag full of raspberry juice. Wild raspberries kind of don't really hold up to much once you pick them. So really, the best thing for wild raspberries is to eat them on a walk, and don't try and take them home. It will take ages and ages as well to get enough to brew this sort of beer. I did find a really good spot last year though of wild golden raspberries, which made me very happy indeed.
Did you just sit there and just eat them all?
Yeah. Just take the kids on a walk and go and eat golden raspberries. They'll never make it into a beer. But yeah, this was bought in whole fruit. So we'll blend from the oak barrels into another tank. It's a big tank with a huge opening at the top, so that we can get all the fruit in, all the herbs. Let it sit, let it ferment those sugars, break the fruit down, and then blend it back and package it. So the fruiting process probably takes about a month, maybe give or take a couple of weeks. And then it's packaged into bottle and bottle conditioned as well. So it's one of the slower production beers that we have.
And so Sweet Cicely, from my research, it's myrrh, which we all know from the story of that there Jesus.
Is it?
Yeah, it's myrrh, mate. Apparently.
Why?
So he got some gold, some frankincense, and some herbs from Somerset.
Some golden raspberries.
Was it you? Were you there, Stu?
Really, really old.
So I'm getting like aniseed. Is that from the Sweet Cicely?
Yeah. So the whole of the plant and the plant looks very much like the leaf shape and the structure of the plant look like cow parsley or one of those plants that you do need to be careful when you're foraging, because there are some poisonous plants in that same category. But you'll know as soon as you rub the leaves or the seed pods that Sweet Cicely is filled with like aniseed flavor. It's really sweet. and yeah, it's delicious. We've used the whole plant in this beer, but you can also use the seeds, and you get the same sort of flavour. It was traditionally used to sweeten preserves and sour jams. Well, yeah, with sour fruits like raspberry. So that's where the idea came from. Really, you've got acidic fruits, acidic beer, dry finish, but that touch of aniseed that kind of lifts the sweetness and brings out that balance. It's not in your face. It's not an aniseed beer, but it's just a nuance there that changes the way you perceive it ever so slightly.
I could only echo the sentiments in the comments. I think it's brilliant. Particularly that aroma is just gorgeous. It's you expect it to be really jammy, and it's got that kind of element to it, but there's just a lovely floral aniseed thing going on that's just really unique and unlike anything I've really smelled in a beer. The only thing it reminds me of is what's the really famous Christmas beer with aniseed in? Guten Carolus Christmas, I think, which is really aniseedy. So it smells a little bit like Christmas to me, which is a slightly strange association to make. But it's, yeah, absolutely banging. Tom and Danny, what do you think?
I think it's really nice. I'm not normally a fan of aniseed, so we're going to read that out of the bottle, but I would agree it really kind of lifts it and adds kind of, I think aniseed, I think I appreciate it a lot more when it's mixed in with something else, and I think that kind of fruited sweetness works, but then the finish is dry, which is nice because I'm not a massive fan of sweet beers in general, so it kind of smells a lot, like I said, jammier than on the taste, but it's like it's nice. I really like it.
Yeah, it's really good. It's kind of there is something slightly Christmassy about it. It kind of, like you say, it smells really jammy, and it smells like it's going to be really sweet, but then you get I think the herb kind of almost makes the raspberries. It definitely kind of takes the edge off the raspberries and gives them a slightly different character, almost kind of like cranberries, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's delicious, lovely.
You guys have used herbs in your beers before as well. I feel like maybe even wild garlic went in one once, which was a surprise.
No, we haven't. We have talked about it.
Yeah.
You never.
When it's wild garlic season, we do put it in literally everything else. It has made it.
But yeah, you have used herbs, maybe lemon thyme and other things. I'm trying to wrap my brains for the beers.
Rosemary. We've used rosemary a couple of times.
Rosemary.
Lemon and rosemary.
That's the one I think. Yeah, the lemon and rosemary saison. Yeah.
And the Alexanders.
We brewed a beer with Abbeydale, their Funk Dungeon project, just over a year ago, and that was a Liechtensteiner style beer. So it was smoky, sour.
Google didn't like that. I was like, nah, shut up. Terrible idea.
That aniseed flavour I associate with like really strong alcohols like Sambuca and Aquavit, all those kind of like crazy rocket fuel things. So it's nice to get that sort of aniseed thing going on in a nice sour beer. It isn't like feel like it's gonna murder me instantly if I drink it.
One of my favourite things I've ever filmed is Brad's face when he was given some aquavit. We'd witnessed a fishing boat being put.
Mate, it was a Viking. They called it a Viking longship.
They called it Viking, but that's because we were tourists. I think it was just a long boat. It wasn't a long boat.
It was a long boat. It had the ballast in it were boulders. It was
boulders and beer.
Boulders and beer.
Yeah. And then, they gave you some aquavit, and I've got this amazing shot of you just like that. It's pretty potent stuff.
They ain't mess around up there.
They did not, and nor did we. Sorry, Little Earth guys, you got cut off while explaining the Lichtenheiner.
Yeah, we've got classic countryside Wi-Fi going on. Yeah, we brewed this beer with Abbeydale, and it was sour, smoky, and it had rosemary and lemon in. And it's one of those beers that we weren't quite sure how it was going to work or come out, but Jim, the brewer over there, just kind of balanced everything just right, and it was absolutely delicious.
It's I was up at Torside last week, who are very well known for their smoky beers, and they gave me their Grozicki, which is a smoked wheat sour from Poland, and it's the first one I've had in years. And it is one of those things where you listen to that whole idea and you think that sounds horrific, but it was so beautifully like just a lovely, lightly soured, lemony beer with just a little hint of smoke, like you'd put some lemon on a barbecued steak or something, and it like actually acidity and smoke can be a really lovely combination. I think it's just so alien to, you wouldn't ever talk about it while drinking, essentially, but it is a really lovely lovely combination. So if I or Tom and Danny have disgusted you by this talk, do watch out for one, because they are very delicious. And if you love smoked beer, check out Torside, because they make amazing smoked beer, and do find balance within it, which is not always the way with smoked beer. Let's dive into the comments. I haven't had a little look. Grozicki is not sour. I could have my beer history wrong, but I'm fairly certain it should be sour. Maybe not. Do tell me, or correct me. That's all good. The same guy also says his buddy's made a wild garlic beer. How did that turn out, Benedict? I think the Little Earth people might want to know. Maybe they'll pluck up the courage eventually. Torside is spelled Torrside, as in a tor, which is an English word for like a rocky top of a mountain, in it, a tor.
I think so.
Yeah, the outcrop, I believe.
Yeah, tor. It's like craft beer. I know what it is when I see it, but I couldn't quite tell you what it is. It's a rocky thing on the top of a hill. That's Tors, not craft beer. Okay. Any other questions? Nothing. We're on top of this. This is very weird. Usually we're miles behind. Guys, if you have any questions, we're getting towards the end of the show. We've still got one more beer to go. But if you have any questions, we will open it up for Ask Us Anything at this point. If you do want to guarantee that you get your answer immediately, you can support the channel by using a super chat, and that's much appreciated. That supports what we do. So get those questions in. It can be to us, or to Little Earth, or to Get It Right. God damn it! Or to Stu down there. Stu's changed position somehow. Well, for me, you have. I don't know whether for anybody else. That's very strange.
Well, there was a surprising amount of sort of foraging chat within the comments. Lots of people seem to be quite expert in it, which is, I think, impressive.
Sign of the kind of audience we attract.
Yeah, great
like
stuff.
Living off the land, educated, living the natural life. I
think when the supermarkets ran out of food last year, people kind of got creative, didn't they, and maybe learned to forage.
Maybe just an excuse to get out.
Yeah.
There you go. According to the BJCP, no sourness in a Grozicki. Well, the one I had definitely was. So that was not to style, apparently. Alex Downham asks, is it a long process of training your taste buds to know how to blend beers, or is it through lots of trial and error? I guess the other question to connect to that would be, do you do it like with a group of people, or is it sort of one or two palates that dictates how it goes?
I think generally it's always best to do it with a group of people, because taste is so subjective. And whilst we all have very similar tastes in beer, just in our small group with Yonder, we do also disagree on quite a lot of things. So having multiple people's input on tasting barrels and writing notes and blending is worthwhile, but it's also just quite a fun thing to do, really, as a team.
So it's just I mean, I guess it's not so much just blending, it's also it is deciding on how you want beers to taste and how you want things to sort of go. So it's creating a kind of almost house style and strategy when it comes to your beers, as well as just picking that one beer.
Yeah, I think we probably pick up on some nuances with certain barrels that some people, when they taste the final blend, will probably never pick up on, which is a shame in some ways. It'd be quite fun to release some single barrel beers, which I guess is what you guys do more so, is it? Or do you blend a couple of barrels or a little?
Yeah, most of our blends are pretty small, so
it's usually just the two of us.
Usually just the two of us tasting them. So yeah, it's not normally an overly complicated process when we do it, because we are kind of just picking a couple of barrels out of maybe half a dozen or so. So
as we grow, we'd like to do.
Yeah,
I'd like to do a lot more because I quite enjoy the whole blending process.
We just had a super chat from Cohen to both breweries. Which beer have you brewed so far that you're most proud of?
That's a very good question.
We can wait. It's good. It's good. It's good content.
We come back to that one.
We've recently released a beer called Defunct IPA, which was like we wanted to brew a beer that was kind of brewed a little bit like a kind of a hoppy IPA, but doing in our own style. So using just our mix of our mixed bugs that we get from the cider, and barrel aged as well. So it's quite a difficult beer to make taste great, because you're working with very bitter hops, barrel aging, and the kind of the tannin characters that we kind of talked about earlier that come from that, but also potentially sourness and dryness, and getting those things all to work is quite difficult. And I think in this particular case, we just about managed it. So I'd say that beer.
That's G.
I think it's one of the first beers that we've brewed and continue to brew that kind of just encompasses everything that we do. It would probably be Trunk of Funk, because it's barrel aged for a long period of time. It's got our mixed culture in there, and it's got the fruit that we forage all through the season and kind of chuck in the blend at the end. And it's a celebration beer, and it's good to release that one every year, and it's always different. So I think that's probably the proudest creation for me personally.
Cool. So we've got a super chat which we'll just answer now, and then we'll move on to the final beer and take some final questions. So firstly, Ben from Filmbusters just wants to say a huge thanks to LEP, Yonder, and CBC tonight. Stunning beers. Just want to cheers and raise a glass to fellow patron Jasper tonight, who couldn't make it but led on a great manifesto of the CBC patrons. So that, if you're not aware, yesterday, or maybe even Tuesday, Jasper and a couple of other people from our Patreon forum, which is our Discord forum, which you can join, sent me a message and asked if they could put a statement to Siobhan, British beer girl, who's been doing some amazing work exposing stories of sexism and sexual assault and sexual harassment in the beer industry. They wanted to put a statement to her in support, because they knew that she'd been struggling with her mental health as a result of that. So we sent that to Siobhan and then put that statement live. with some practical steps that Craft Beer Channel and our Patreons are going to take at beer events or conversations online to make sure that craft beer is a safe space for everybody. And that was led by Jasper. So I'm going to put a little bit of beer in my glass and raise a little cheers to Jasper as well for leading that.
Well done.
And cheers Ben as well.
And cheers Ben
tonight representing.
So yes, let's move on to our final beer of the night. Keep those questions coming in. We'll try and get to all of them if we can. I know I've got a couple queued up ready for once we've introduced this final beer, which is the Blackcurrant and Rye Sour from Little Earth.
We should just get that on.
It's getting dark out there, Stu.
It is. It's getting cold as well. But I'm cheating. I've got a heater. Look.
That feels very un-Yonder. Sat there outside with a heater.
I should have kept that quiet, shouldn't
I? That was a bit lively, Tom. There's some carbonation in this one.
So unlike us. Oh my god. I'm so embarrassed.
That smells amazing.
Looks amazing too. Woo.
Yeah, we've had it on in the pub, and I think we're on our second can. It's been flying out. It's been really popular. Definitely got a bit more of a acidic punch to it, I think, than the other ones we've had today.
So this is actually using Puree. So it's not something we normally do, and early last year we kind of had these this rye sour, and we really wanted to add some fruity punch to it, and we'd had lots of beers from other breweries that use this really great blackcurrant puree, and we thought, oh, we'll get some and see what we can do with it. So the idea was kind of to get a fruit that really kind of matches and balances the rye, the slightly spicy note in the beer. Something that would kind of enhance the base beer rather than just overwhelm it, but also add a real kind of big punchy punch to it.
Fruit punch is a really accurate word for it. It's really fruit punchy. Sorry, the alcohol's getting to me at this point, but it's got a lovely kind of, it's surprisingly smoothie-esque for you guys, and a real kind of Ribena blackcurrant vibe, but also that, like spiciness and clearly sort of a rye sour underneath. It's a really layered beer.
Is it bad? I want to drink this warm.
Well, like a warm Ribena before bedtime.
Yeah.
It'll certainly send you off to sleep.
Ours isn't particularly cold, actually, is it?
No, ours
it's been out of the fridge.
Cold,
But yeah, I think it does work. It probably works slightly warmer than you would have kind of a beer, maybe like 10 degrees or something, rather than really cooling it down.
I think with the tannins, it certainly on the finish, because it's full-bodied, that smoothie vibe. It's a little bit sweet. There's not a huge amount of sourness for you guys. It's quite restrained, sort of acidity-wise. Feels quite a lot like a really rich, like Rioja red wine kind of thing. So maybe that's why the taste feels good.
It's interesting as well, because like I said, we have it on draft right now, and I actually find it. I was talking about how it's so sour, but I feel like the draft version, I don't know if with the additional carbonation, if that just pushes that sour on, because I feel like the colder and the more carbonated it is, I find the sourness comes through, because this is actually quite easy drinking compared to a lot of people have the draft version.
I've been doing some research. So in the book I'm writing, which I mention in every video and every live show about seasonal drinking, there's a chapter on fireside beers, and one of the risks of drinking by the fire is your beer gets warm. So the whole chapter is about beers that you can drink at a slightly warmer temperature. And I did some research and read some scientific papers about why flavors come out or don't come out at certain temperatures. And one of the things that I learned is that acidity doesn't really vary with temperature, perceived acidity, but obviously sweetness does. So I think what's happening is, everything else in this beer as it warms is coming to the fore, and the acidity isn't kind of increasing as it warms. So you end up with a beer that feels less acidic. So yeah, watch out for that book and more slightly dull scientific conversations around it. But yeah, I love this. It's delicious. It's so different. Like, we've had 2 raspberry beers. All of these beers have been fruited except for the subculture in some form. And this one is very, very different to all of the other ones. Well, they've all been different, but this one has a completely different texture to all of them. And a different finish. Stu, what do you think?
Yeah, I really like it. The first hit was that Ribena aroma that made me really want to get stuck into it. And what I was expecting, because blackcurrants are so sour usually, is to be really kind of punched in the face with acidity, but it's really well balanced and works really well with those flavors that I picked up from the last 2 beers that run through all these beers with the mixed culture. So it's really good. It's a really good one to end on as well. I think it's delicious.
I agree, and I think it's a great little nightcap beer as well. Doing the drinking order for this show, like usually it's like you look at the ABV, you try to mix it up, and you sort of think about what's going to dominate and what you're going to lose. With this, I was like, I don't really know where to start with so many bold flavors and acidity and bitterness and tannins, and actually finishing on this one was probably about right.
Yeah, good call.
About right. So let's dive back into some of the questions that have been coming through. Xander asks, what's the weirdest herb that either of you have added to a beer flavor-wise? Weird is indifferent to what would be considered normal for a beer. So have any flavors really surprised you, or something you've put in there that's created some pretty weird flavors?
I mean, I've got 2 in my head, but I'm scared to. maybe I just feel different about that. Before I met Tom, I tried the Meadowsweet beer, and we did a Meadowsweet, or he did a Meadowsweet saison. Saison?
Sour.
Just a sour. And for me, at the time, it was kicking up a bit of like Band-Aid vibes, which eventually I think chilled out, but it kind of put me off Meadowsweet, which I'd never had before. But again, like I said, it just needed more time in bottle, and it came out really, really well eventually. So it was kind of I think a wild card one. I don't know if you've used it before.
I hadn't used it
At that point. And the Alexanders, I'm still on the fence of. I love the idea of them, and I think it works, but it does give the beer a bit more of that kind of herbal feel, which I'm not 100% sold on. I think if we did it again, I think we'd maybe use just specific parts of I think the seeds would be quite interesting, like how you use like coriander seeds and things in beer. I think you'd use that very specifically. I think adding the stalk leaves, or maybe giving it a bit too much of a herbal feel.
It was kind of almost slightly kind of a green, kind of almost vegetable, but not quite characteristic going on there, because it is a little bit like kind of celery. Like I said, the leaves are a bit like parsley. There's kind of a slight flavour that maybe jars with kind of the base beer itself, but again, that mellowed out over time.
Yeah, I think we've still got some bottles of it, so I'm quite keen to try it again. It's probably been about a year since we've had it, so again, most of the time everything kind of just like chills out the longer you leave it. So I think that there's nothing really bad that's ever been used. I think it's in the experimental stages of how long you leave something till you release it. Something to be good for a bit, but in the grand, it could change. Usually things age for the better. And
well, we'll come back to that. We just had a super chat come in. Superb chats and beers. Need to see more of Brad's funky trousers. They're shorts though, right?
Yeah, these are. If you could listen to the future podcast we recorded today for tomorrow, then you would know I'm wearing sort of 90s Jazzy Jeff style short. Here you go. Whoa.
They're strong. Oh, bit of thigh there as well. Lovely.
There's the OnlyFans sort of stuff going on. Yeah, so and you can see I've got all sorts of weird cushions and things going on as well. So hey.
There you go. I hope that was worth your super chat there, Callum.
Yeah, £5. Well, we appreciate it. Thank you.
I was cheaper than OnlyFans, actually.
Sorry, I've got a question about aging bottles, but before that, Stu, have you had anything that's been really unusual that you've used?
Lots of things that are unusual, and quite often it's hard to tell if it's in a good way or a bad way sometimes, because some people love it and some people won't. One that sticks out for me, though, I think, was using rock samphire seeds in a wild ale, which had really good, like, carroty, almost like burnt orange flavors that were actually quite Christmassy. Again, it's weird that we seem to lean towards Christmassy flavors with spices, but it also had a bit of saltiness as well, which is what it wasn't intentionally a gozer, but this sour beer with a lick of salt from the rock samphire definitely lent towards that direction. We've also had the same experience with Meadowsweet as well, though, with medicinal flavors, and it's a compound in Meadowsweet actually that does it. You can originally extract aspirin from Meadowsweet, so that's where that comes from, apparently.
There you go. The more you know. Just had another super chat. How has Brexit affected your business in the EU? I'm having a lot of trouble finding any UK web shops who ship outside the UK. Well, from our point of view, we really apologise because we used to be able to do full European tastings, and at the moment we can only offer it out to the UK. But has that hurt your businesses? Did you do much export?
Stu, do you want to start? Probably do more.
Yeah, I can do. Yeah, I mean, we didn't do loads. We did a little bit, but it certainly affected it. I mean, it's hard to tell what, because so much has happened over the last 12 months. Which part of that has actually affected export? It's hard to tell, really. But sales everywhere have been difficult. But export maybe starting to pick up, but I don't know where we would have been if these things hadn't happened. So it's hard to say, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would probably echo that. We've had a lot of interest, like, basically since it all came in. We weren't exporting loads beforehand, but we make so little. Something like the raspberry sour, so it went like 312 bottles of it. It's pretty difficult to separate things like that out for our own, just the UK market, let alone anyone else. But we do have regular kind of people coming to us asking, but very, very rarely do we ever have enough to be able to. We've got a couple bigger batches coming out, but again, bigger batches for us are really quite small for anyone.
And it is going to make it more difficult, isn't it? So.
Yeah. We've had, people have been really, we've spoken to a few other brewers about it, and there's quite a few that still do it regularly that have, offered to help us out when we need to figure it out, because I've not even really looked into what it involves yet, because we've been quite busy with lots of other things, obviously, but yeah, we weren't doing enough to say that it's really affected us, but it's definitely maybe giving us a bit more hesitant to be like angling for it in the future, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I really hope that they find a way to make this easier for all people that look to export, because it's not just beer that's been really heavily affected by this. There's a lot of rules that just don't make sense for export for small businesses. So fingers crossed this deal that we've signed evolves. Before I bring up this next question, I wanted to ask about bottles, because we've had some questions that have sort of skirted around the idea. But are you guys keeping sort of a catalogue or a library of beers that you're aging away, or do you recommend that people age any of the beers or certain beers that you guys you guys make?
I try and keep a few bottles behind. Sometimes we accidentally sell them all. There's a few, and it's really difficult right now because the pub is actually selling bottles really well. We've had quite a few people come through and buy things, and we've kind of got to this point where we balance out, is it worth me keeping these bottles? Is it worth me putting them into the shop to sell them? So I'm kind of desperately holding on to, I think, 3 cases each of like It's Life Gin and Gin Jam, which were our 26-hour boil barley wines. Just to see, I'm just quite interested to see how they age. The fruit ones, maybe I'm less worried about, but the kind of more historic styles that we brew, the organic stock ales, and even the defunct, the kind of hoppier, funky IPAs, those kind of things. I think there's a lot more.
There's room for them
interest for them to develop. Yeah. We've got another organic East India IPA that we brewed basically based on the fact that I think we had a keg of it that was like 2 or 3 years old that we put on the pub, and it just tasted incredible that we were like, okay, we're going to brew more, and then we're just going to leave it and like see how that goes, because that obviously worked. Because we're still young, and I do imagine you have very similar feelings. We've not been going in the grand scheme of things that long. We're really only just coming up to times where we'll have things that have aged, even in barrel, for 2, 3. Well, we've had anything in barrel for 4 years, but things that have aged a bit longer. So we're only really just starting to learn how these things develop, where you've got people like Cantillon have been brewing for hundreds of years or however long that, they kind of know, they've got their blends kind of planned out and know what they're doing, whereas we're still just finding space to throw barrels and decide how to age things. So bottle, I'd like to get a bit more of a better system, I think, for aging bottle stuff, but we've got to balance it with cash flow as well.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess there's definitely a commercial element, but also you're kind of guessing a little bit, Stu, when your mixed culture's only had a couple of years to develop.
Yeah. We've got some stuff kind of stashed away. We've tried to, but it was a similar story with the very first brews. We just had to sell it all. I really wanted to keep some, but that Rock Samphire beer that I was talking about, I'd really like to try that right now, see how it's tasting a couple of years on. But yeah, we have got a stash of some things though that we can dig out of the cellar. In fact, we last year we brought some of our stash out that had been aging in the cellar for probably about a year to sell through the web shop, and that went really quickly actually, which is quite good.
Awesome. So Danny, you touched on it, but we've got a question from Benedict about whether you want to revive, historic mixed cultures used in porter IPA, or just brew those styles of beers with yours. So you've done a couple of classic old school styles with the mixed fermentation that would have been roughly accurate for them.
Yeah, I think it's probably something we'll look at going forward, kind of actually looking back at records and just seeing what these cultures were that were being used. We had a beer recently from the New Zealand brewery, which was brewed with a Brett strain.
Was that the old ale?
Yeah.
Oh, the old ale. Yeasty Boys and what's his name? Kieran. I can't remember what his brewery is called. Kieran Haslettmore. What's his brewery? North? Is it North End? North? Something like that? Do we know? New Zealand breweries. Yeasty Boys did a collaboration and they did an old ale. And it was brewed with who's yeast?
It was a yeast that was basically isolated from an old bottle of Burton brewed. I can't remember the brewery, but it was an old
North End.
Yeah, it was North End and Yeasty Boys. Yeah.
And that particular beer had it had an amazing character to it. Didn't it? It was kind of really different to anything I've ever had before, and I think it was coming from this single strain of Brettanomyces in there. So that is something that we will be looking at doing because it's super interesting. why not?
Yeah, we have done things like the 1773, the Heritage Brown Porter, which is kind of brewed in, oddly enough, style from recipes from 1773, I imagine. And obviously the stock ale, and even the IPA. Obviously we brewed it with Nelson Sauvin and Amarillo.
Oh, that's
hops,
that's the new one.
The new one, yeah, the defunct. So it's obviously an IPA, but it's kind of aged and brewed with the mixed culture in ways, I imagine. So obviously it's not a direct interpretation, but kind of a modern spin on it.
Yeah, so going forward, we want to carry on doing things that are very unique to our own brewery, but also look at doing some really interesting things where you can bring pieces of history into it as well.
And Stu, have you ever done any historical recipes? It feels like maybe not.
No, not really. I mean, I think like we kind of try to. We're definitely influenced by stuff, but we try to look forward, and I think that's kind of where the brewery name came from, really. Although it's kind of quite an old archaic word, Yonder. It's about kind of looking forward and trying to be influenced by stuff, but push it a little bit as well. So no, we've experimented with beer styles, but not to that level, which is, I mean, I'm really interested in it and love seeing people do it, but yeah, it's not something that we've done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Well, I think we're going to have to call it a night there. Thank you so much for all of your questions in the comments, and thank you so much, guys, for being on the show and chatting through a full 6 beers, which is not easy to do. I haven't needed one of these, so it's a bit lost.
Will you send through the screen to me, please, John? Whoa.
We might regret it tomorrow. So we've got a train in now 8 hours to Lost and Grounded, where we're going to be drinking lots of lager, which is probably what we need after a night of mixed fermentation. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. If anybody is looking for a weekend away, I can heartily recommend going to Little Earth and camping or staying in their cottages. And I bet the pub is absolutely flying now with the new manager and a great little beer fridge as well. Somebody asked earlier, Stu, if you guys do camping.
So there's the landlord here that lives on site has this year installed one of what will eventually be 7 or 8 Hobbit-style glamping pods, which they're fully booked. They've only got one installed. They're fully booked through this year, but they're taking bookings for next year now when they'll be installing the rest of them in September. So, yeah, as well as the tap being open on a Saturday with people traveling all over the place, by then we'll have a captive audience as well. So, yeah, get booking now. It's called the Little Shire if you want to book a pod.
Proper Hobbit style.
Yeah.
Wait, are they going to be sort of like under turf and stuff as well?
Yeah, they're like mounds of the little hills, proper Hobbit style.
Wow.
It looks fantastic.
Or Teletubby style, it sounds like.
I must dress up as a Teletubby and go and run over it at some point.
So you can camp at both these breweries, which is quite an amazing situation. And yeah, all the beers tonight have been absolutely stellar. So it's been an honor having you guys. If you've enjoyed the show, everybody out there, we do have a feature where we went foraging with Stu for nettles and dandelions, and where we explored the brewery at Little Earth and talked a lot about saison with Little Earth. So either of those, I'll put links in the descriptions box after this show so that you can see those, or you can just look for them on the YouTube search. So yeah, guys, thank you so much for being on the show, and I hope that we can come down and see you soon and make some more films and drink some more of your very wonderful beer.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers to everyone in the comments too. Love and beer.